If you've looked and applied the information which I've given you with all of the tutorials using the levels palette, which probably would be your natural first point of call to adjust contrast in Photoshop had you not used the program before, your next logical step, I suppose, and to give you some more control and a better result really, would be to move on to using curves, and I would recommend using curves over and before using levels. So if you've looked at those movies and you've made sense of them, and you've improved your images, hopefully, a lot of the information that applied to levels will apply for curves. So we don't need as many movies now, but we'll be using this different tool. Now again, for this tutorial, as with many of them, I like to use these National Geographic images, which you can find on the National Geographic websites. And I should say that these images have been doctored. I've doctored them to be rather dull and lackluster, obviously, so we can see a good before and after with the adjustments that we're making. So I have, as I say, doctored these images, so bear that in mind. It's no reflection on the actual photography from the website, which, as you know, is world class and outstanding by some of the best wildlife photographers in the world. So let's have a look at curves. We can find curves in our adjustment layers panel, and here we go. Now this is displaying in the background there pretty much exactly what you would see in the way of a graph, the graphical information which you'd see on your levels palettes. And also we've got this grayscale ramp moving from black on the left to white on the right, again much like you'd see in the levels palette. And of course you've got these eyedropper tools for making adjustments should you want in terms of colour and contrast. That's not something I use, but much like in the levels palette, we can see that there's a problem with this file. There's information missing here, and there's information missing here, so we know that our blacks are not black, which is really obvious. If I roll the mouse over there and you look at the info palette reading here, you can see the blacks are reading 242, which as you know will not be black, and the brightest parts of the image, which I haven't found yet, but they're not going to be very white at all. So we know that these adjustments need to be made. Now everything that was said earlier with the levels adjustment applies here. In other words, if you want to protect a certain white point of your image, an image that's the white point in the image that's important to you for the print, because let's not forget, in this print, because this text is along the bottom here, that would naturally be read by the palette as being the brightest part of the image. But obviously for our adjustments, that's not going to be important to us. I should imagine some of this detail here, or maybe on some of the closing or whatever, will be the most important information. In other words, if I hold down the Alt key and I start moving this, you can see at the bottom there that the white is coming up first and the text at the bottom of the image, but that's not necessarily going to be the most important white point in the image as far as I'm concerned. It's these other bits that were showing up in red here. So if we want to protect those points, the same thing goes. We hold the Shift key down and click to place a marker, and you can see that point there, its highest value is 250, and I would say that's a bit too high. So we need to grab that point and just back off a bit, looking at that value, which we've now brought down to 244 with its highest value. So in this particular area here, and I'm going to zoom into that area now by holding the Control key and the space bar down and clicking and dragging with the mouse. And now these are very low resolution images, that's why when you zoom in like this they appear very pixelated. They're only 72 ppi for the screen, but let's zoom out a little bit by pressing Control and minus on the keyboard. You can see that that point there, at least we're going to have some information on the print, so we haven't blasted it out with white. And conversely, let's just click a black point on an area that should be black. I'll hold the Shift key down and click. We've got marker number 2, and let's just keep an eye on that value there while we take it to 10 or below, so that we know that that's going to print black. Now let me just zoom back out, Control and minus there, So if we can do this much as the same as we've done with the levels, why am I saying that curves is better, and why should we use curves? Well, at the moment we're doing just this straight, very straight line linear adjustment, which, don't forget, that is all what you get when you use levels. It's this very 3-point black, white and midpoint adjustment, and it's very linear, it's very harsh. There's no curve, there's no ease of transition between the tones. But with the curves palette, what we can do is, we've set our endpoints, but we can add some points now. Don't forget that this is where the information is. So if I want to add a little bit more contrast, I can click a few points and create what's known as a classic S-type curve. And you can see we get this nice smooth curving shape going through the image, which gives you this nice gradual change in tonal transition across those tones of the image, and that, believe me, gives you a much nicer effect than it does in levels. Now this, once we've set the endpoints here, and with this particular image, it really doesn't need that steep a tonal curve. We can achieve the same thing with a broader curve if I hadn't set the endpoints first. I'll show you what that means in a minute. But let me just click the preview on and off. That was before with the doctored and very flat image, and that's the adjustment made with all of the image using its full tonal range, which improves the color contrast, which in itself has the effect of improving the detail as well. And you can see that's a much nicer effect. So let me hold down the Alt key and hit the reset button. If I wanted to just use the 2 control points without setting the endpoints, you'll see that the curve is going to have to be much steeper, and we can end up at the same result. And you can certainly do it this way. I mean, I set the endpoints first, but you don't necessarily have to do that. But bearing in mind that this point here now is controlling the highlights, and the same thing goes as before. If you remember, we set marker number 1 here, marker number 1 is here. Now as I made that adjustment there, I was keeping an eye on that marker, making sure we didn't go over 240, 245. So don't forget that when you're taking this marker and you're pushing it up, 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 you can see those values are too high now, and we'll lose some detail on the print. So we're going to drag that marker down and back again, just to preserve that highlight detail. I'm going to finish this movie here, and we'll rejoin this image in the next movie, and where we'll talk about the curves palette in a little more detail.